Hello everybody, I'm Silly. This will be part 7, chapter 7, of Through the Eyes of a Quirkless Child. All for One considered himself a man in control. He had spent 200 years building his empire, spreading his influence, and gathering resources. He was calm, collected, and never caught off guard. That is, until now. He had learned to prepare for just about anything, to be ready for the unexpected at any moment. Which was why it was unsettling, to say the least, that he had been taken by surprise and was now holding a disassociated teenager like an infant. Even worse was that Tomura had caught the lapse in composure. He even had photographic evidence of All for One's panicked expression. In any other situation, he would have been proud of his successor's resourcefulness. But now, in a moment of weakness, Tomura had turned against him. He shuddered to think of what Tomura would be able to get away with now. How far he would be able to stretch the first piece of blackmail material he had ever gotten against his sensei. Perhaps a new video game console, or... oh no. Tomura had been asking about getting a new kitten for a couple of weeks now. It was already hard enough to say no to him. How was All for One supposed to deny Tomura his kitten when his very reputation was at stake? Never mind that now. What was more important was dealing with the child in his arms. Heavily disassociated, traumatized, and trembling like a leaf in the wind. All for One had some things to think about. All Might was within their grasp now. And, hypothetically, he thought it might be very distressing for his enemy to see the effects of his own actions. That it would be fun to see All Might cry. But, no. Taking advantage of Izuku's disassociated state would be wrong. See, Yoichi? He's a good person. He sighed and set Izuku down in a leather recliner that only seemed to make the child look smaller, more vulnerable. He would be safe while All for One attended other business. He knew that once Izuku was stable again, a difficult conversation would be had. And there were still some things that needed to be done before that discussion. Taking one last look at Izuku, All for One left his office and locked the door behind him. First things first. All Might had to be dealt with. Every ounce of suffering that Izuku had felt would be dealt tenfold onto the seventh thief of Yoichi's quirk. He had already taken the liberty of getting that Bakugo boy's power. Best to be as accurate as possible, after all. And it wasn't as if the boy was getting any real use out of it. He only ever used it to hurt people or scare them. Abusers like Bakugo don't deserve quirks. Especially when they use their power to mindlessly victimize innocent people. Honestly, it was like taking candy from a baby. Why his mother had let Bakugo walk freely outside in the middle of the night was beyond All for One. But it made his job easier, so he would let the stupidity go. It was fun seeing the look on the boy's face when his explosions did nothing against All for One. Even more so to watch the light leave his eyes as his quirk was ripped from him, and he was knocked unconscious. This was better than any other punishment or torture All For One could have come up with, forcing the boy to live as one of those quirkless losers he hated so much. Striding quickly down the dark stairway into the doctor's basement, All For One collected all the quirks he would be using in his mind. One to simulate being thrown from a great height, one to cut in a way that resembled the quirk of one of Izuku's childhood bullies, and of course, one to explode. A sinister grin spread across his face. He could hardly contain his excitement. This was going to be very fun. Turning the corner, All For One stopped in front of a large metal door. He took a moment to compose himself. No need to betray his excitement before the party even began. The door opened silently, hinges well-oiled and heavy. All Might jumped to his feet, lunging at All For One. Before he got within arm's reach, the hero was ripped back to the wall. All For One had been prepared. He knew All Might would find a way out of his quirk-canceling cuffs on his arms or legs, but the one around his throat would be inescapable. Combine that with a chain attached to the back wall, and All For One would have total freedom to do whatever he liked. Now, Toshinori. Calm down before you choke yourself. All For One smirked. The man was just so easy to rile up. Perfect for what All For One was planning next. As if I'd ever listen to a thing you say, villain. I'll never stop fighting you. All Might's voice was raspy, and he was shaking already. Just from those few movements, he had overworked himself. All For One sighed. Well, if the hero didn't want to save his energy, that was fine. Waking up with a limb or two amputated would have a similar effect as having to watch them be removed. He was certain. Until then, some explosions would do to start off with. Alright then, shall we get straight to the point? I'm here about your successor, Midoriya Izuku. A dark chuckle slipped from All For One's lips, a toothy grin spreading across his face. What did you do to him? I knew something must have happened. No way would young Midoriya take this long to defeat you villains, unless you did something. Is he alive? Is he injured? Did you kill him? All Might flew into a rage at this, pulling against the chain until his throat turned red, the stitches there almost threatening to tear apart. Izuku is mine now. I'll be keeping him safe, so don't you worry your little head over it. If I were you, Toshinori, I would be more concerned with other matters. All For One didn't bother holding back his excitement now, almost giggling with euphoria. Everything was going perfectly. All Might paled at that. What did he mean? What else should he be worrying about? Ah, I see you're wondering what's going to happen. Only because I am in a particularly gracious mood. I suppose I can share some of the details with you. All for One flicked the switch by the door, and All Might's chains shortened until his back was pressed to the wall. The moment the chain was fully retracted, metal cuffs shot out of the wall and latched around his wrists, pulling them up and away from his torso almost painfully. Yagi Toshinori, I had always taken you for a fool, so it was a bit shocking to hear what you had done. To do something of this manipulative caliber takes quite a bit of forethought. And if it hadn't been used against a child, I would have been proud. But now, I'll need to punish you. All for One sighed, feigning disappointment and shaking his head as he pulled a rolling tray of surgical tools into the room. Scissors, needles, and surgical thread, gauze, drills, and saws pre-sanitized and ready for use. The cart came to a stop on the wall across from All Might, an ominous warning of what was to come. You won't get away with this. I'm the #1 hero. You can't just do what you want to me and expect to walk away. All Might snarled, pulling against the cuffs. Oh, Toshinori, you don't seem to understand. I don't plan on letting you live. They won't even be able to find your body. These are your last days. If I were you, I'd spend them more wisely. All for One laughed, kneeling in front of All Might. Before the hero had a chance to respond, he continued. This is all because of what you did to Izuku. You accuse me of hurting him, doing something to him. Did you even stop to think about how you hurt him? Izuku is a child. He wasn't even out of middle school when you saddled him with a legacy and a curse you knew he couldn't handle. You intended to throw a 15-year-old into battle against me, an S-ranked supervillain who has more quirks than can be counted, and hundreds of years of experience on that boy. If Izuku is hurting, it is by no other fault than your own. All for One spat, shaking with anger. There was no grin on his face now. I didn't. You did, Toshinori. You gave a child, still going through puberty, a power he could never hope to control. Every single time you built your strength, you hammered another nail into the boy's coffin. One for All is stockpiling quirk. It is a miracle Izuku's arms and legs didn't explode the moment he ate that hair. My brother's quirk should have died with you. All for One interrupted harshly. He had no intention of letting All Might try to defend himself. Nothing the man could say would change what has already been set into motion. All Might stilled against the wall, face going slack with shock. Yun Midoriya's bone breaks were because of him? He assumed it had been because Yun Midoriya was too small, too weak to handle his power. But it was Toshinori's fault all along. All that pain The surgeries, the nerve damage, and chronic pain. Every last bit of that was his fault. He said he cared for the boy, then turned around and practically turned his bones to powder. You seem to be catching on, Toshinori. Do you realize now why I have to punish you? Why I have to do this? It's the golden rule, after all. Treat others the way you would want to be treated. All for One smiled condescendingly, tilting his head as if All Might was a fussy child. All Might didn't respond, but he didn't need to. His eyes flicked to the tray against the wall, and back again to All for One. He knew what was going to happen to him, and he knew there was no way out. All for One sighed, rolling his eyes. No, not that yet. You see, in your desperation for any vulnerable child to throw my brother's quirk onto, you neglected to look into Izuku's life outside of how it affected you. You never stepped in when Bakugo Katsuki burned him, scarred him, and told him to end his life. You never cared about Izuku. You cared about having someone who can't say no to you. Young Bakugo told him, what? No, he wouldn't. You're lying just like always. You're a villain, you lie. You want me to be weak. All Might shook his head, eyes distant. Believe me, I wouldn't lie about this. If I cared more about what you thought, I would show you the footage. But I'm not here to convince you of your own failures. You won't live long enough to change your behavior anyway. Then why tell me? What's the point of telling me this if you're just going to torture and kill me in the end? All Might scoffed. I want to see your face when you realize that everyone you claim to care about, you failed. Izuku, Night-Eye, Nana Shimura. Her grandson, Tenko. You're the #1 hero, but you never managed to save the ones who mattered. All for One sharpened his fingertips to points, raising his hand over All Might's head, and slashed. Izuku woke with a start. Distantly, he thought he heard a pained, blood-curdling scream. But it was gone the moment he thought he was really hearing it. Must have been his imagination, then. Sitting up and stretching his arms over his head, he took the time to look around the room he was in. It was very obviously not Shigaraki's room, but similarly, it had no windows. He was sitting in a leather recliner made for someone much larger than him, the chair facing diagonally out of the corner. Izuku couldn't deny that it was extremely comfortable, but he was more concerned with who the recliner was for. He didn't recall anyone in the league being big enough to need a chair this size. Except muscular. The room was clearly for someone more sophisticated than that, though. Whoever it was seemed to have a distantly vintage taste. Really vintage taste at that. There was an entire floor-to-ceiling bookshelf dedicated to comic books Izuku had never seen before. Whole shelves dedicated to different heroes: Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, Captain Marvel. Jeez, that's a lot of captains. He didn't recognize any of them, but he thought they looked cool in their costumes. Izuku stood and looked to another shelf. This one hanging off the wall by twisted metal rope. The shelf, reminiscent of Shigaraki's, was packed to the limit with figurines and plushies, but these were odd. The figures were still in their original packaging, and they were apparently called Funko Pops. The plushies, too, had their tags attached. They were Beanie Babies. Izuku had never heard of any of those before, but based on how pristine they looked, they were loved and well cared for. Turning away from the shelves, Izuku took in the rest of the room. Centrally, there was a large wooden desk with a desk chair to match. There was nothing on the desk at all. No computer, no papers, not even a pen cup. Not to mention that everything was in amazing condition, as if it had been frozen in perfection. How odd. Behind the desk was a large painting, a portrait, of two people with white hair. The larger of the two was mostly in shadow, but the smaller was bathed in golden light. He looked sickly, his cheeks sunken in, but his eyes bright. A natural-looking smile on his face. The presumably older man was looking down at the other lovingly, as if he hung the stars and the moon himself. It was melancholy to look at for some reason. The painting itself seemed happy enough, but Izuku couldn't help but feel sad. He looked away from the portrait, frowning. Whoever painted it must have some emotional aura quirk or something like that. On the other wall opposite him, there were giant bookshelves filled to the brim with books Izuku didn't recognize. Some appeared to be on quirk theory, analysis, physiology, and more than 24 were photo albums. He knew better than to look through them, though. If just that painting was enough to bring him nearly to tears, he wanted nothing to do with the family photos. But maybe just one look wouldn't hurt? It was smart to know your enemy, after all. And it would be helpful to know who he was up against. The excuse was flimsy, even to Izuku, but it was good enough to be nosy with. Picking the first one in the lineup, Izuku settled back into the recliner and began to flip through photos. The first was of a baby, a small tuft of white hair on its head, and a single bright green eye peeking open. The baby was very small, too thin for a newborn, still cradled in the hospital blanket. The hat covered most of the baby's head was blue with white. The hat covering most of the baby's head was blue with white stripes. so Izuku assumed the baby was a boy. Despite the apparent illness and fragility, the baby was remarkably cute. Below the photo, in careful pen, was Shigaraki Yoichi. Shigaraki? Did the villain have a son no one knew about? Izuku shuddered to think of the poor soul that had to... Nope. Not gonna think about that. No thank you. Skipping past a few pages, Izuku stopped on one that included 2 boys, rather than just Yoichi, like the past few pages had been. The other boy was clearly healthier and older than the other, and had Yoichi in a playful headlock. They looked to be 2 young children by this point. The note below the picture read, Yoichi and redacted, playing. The older boy's name had been deliberately scratched out, so hard it dented the paper. Yet another red flag to be added to the collection. The rest of the album had both boys together. It seemed they never left each other's sides. Reaching the last photo in the album, Izuku stopped. The 2 were teenagers now, and Yoichi looked an awful lot like the first holder. Like, almost identical. Not to mention the painting, the portrait on the back wall was of the first holder and his brother. Oh, God. The first holder's brother was all for one, and he was in a room covered in vintage decorations with photo albums of Yoichi and his older brother. He was in All For One's office. Oh, fuck. Setting the photo album carefully back in its place so no one would notice it had ever been moved, Izuku rushed to the door and pulled as hard as he could. With no luck. The door was firmly locked, the metal and wood not bending in the slightest, even as Izuku activated One for All in a desperate attempt to flee. The situation had immediately gone from bad to life-threatening. He was locked in All For One's office. He had gone through his personal photo album, had slept in his chair. Izuku was practically dead already. In the next moment, he froze. In the distance, there was that gut-wrenching scream again, and the sound of a drill. Alright, everybody, that concludes Part 7, Chapter 7 of Through the Eyes of a Quirkless Child. I'm gonna be real, when I put the poll up for what fic you guys wanted me to record next, I did not expect this to win as badly as it did. Like, this was insanely voted on. I don't remember the exact percentage, just it shook me. I was shooketh. Because let me tell you, this fic, I love it. I love, like, the idea of it. I just don't particularly like how inaccurate it is. With the whole All For One kind of being a hypocrite. Because, like, if we take a look at Shigaraki for, like, 5 seconds, you manipulated that child into being your successor. And now you're getting mad at All For One? Not All For One. All Might for doing it, it don't really make sense. And just also with the photo albums and stuff, knowing now with the final season of My Hero and getting a look into All For One's background and the whole story between how Yoichi and him were like brought up and whatnot, it just doesn't seem that accurate. It's a good fic, just I don't like the inaccuracies. But y'all seem to love this thing. On a side note, I didn't realize that I hadn't posted in 2 weeks because finals are coming up. I have a final in like 12 days. I am scared. I think I'll do good on it. But so I've been just studying for my finals, getting that out of the way, and I'm also doing a project with Prinks, which is the fic is called Thick Thighs. The fic is called Thick Thighs Saves Lives, and they post it on their channel, and it's a collaboration between me, them, and a bunch of other podfickers where we're doing the voices for them. I can link it in the description below so you guys can check it out if you want to, because I personally love it. The editing is amazing. I think it's cool how all of these podfickers, can come together and do something this big. I think it's amazing. I highly recommend you check them out. They also have good podfics in general. I love watching them. I think their channel's great. I'll link that down below in case you want to look at it though. And without further ado, please make sure to check out the Discord if you haven't already. If you would like to get updates easier, get connected with people within the fanfiction community, make requests for a podfic, and more. The link to the server will be in the description. Now, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening.